Welcome to Revealing Conversations with Petra Nicoll, again from the beautiful Louise River in Woodland, Washington. I have the great pleasure to interview Lawrence Schechter today. He is an architect, and I met Lawrence about a year ago, but it seems really like we've known each other forever. We share many values and interests. Above all, he is a visionary with a bold and brilliant streak of exuberance for life and willingness to find truth under many guises. He's also an avid writer in search of clarity that is often covered by lies perpetuated about the past. Accounts of his travels to Egypt are especially vivified by fresh insight, merged with a stunning backdrop of research by many other brave and brilliant people who've treaded well beyond the protocols of authority of Egyptology and other vestiges of empirical authority. As an architect, Lawrence's career in sustainable architecture covers some 50 plus years following graduating from the University of Illinois. He is principal of his own firm known as Schechter Architect LLC, now situated in Bend, Oregon, with LEED accreditation. His career shifted gears while living in San Francisco in 1975. That was followed by a life-changing trip to Egypt 3 years later. A return to Egypt in 2019 was organized as a journey of a lifetime for a group of 14 friends. His accounts of that trip are electrifying, disturbing, and virtually unequivocal. With fresh eyes and open minds, we may finally recognize a true continuity with Egypt's inheritance that makes sense and allows us to connect the dots of our collective past and future. His story seems incredible, but the one told repeatedly to millions of visitors leaves them amazed and in disbelief, and for good reason. Let's see why. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you, Petra. It's so good to be with you again.
It's so nice to see you. And I must say, I'm drawing closer and closer to Bend, Oregon because of you.
Great. That's wonderful. Keep coming.
Being an avid skier, and my son moved there, so that I have many reasons now, and you're one of them.
Yes, that's great.
So Lawrence, tell us a little bit about your work and lifestyle.
Well, I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and graduated from the University of Illinois in 1963 with a Bachelor of Architecture degree. I later got married and moved to San Francisco, and my two daughters, Leah and Dana, were born there. And I spent 8 years in a prominent architectural office in San Francisco and became an associate of the firm and project manager, especially in R&D facilities in Silicon Valley, and won awards in design for some of the earliest projects of my career. But I soon found that corporate architecture was not adequately addressing environmental and sustainability challenges. And in 1972, I felt it was time for a change. So I was inspired by the writings of Greek author Nikos Kazantzakis, and I went to Greece and Crete and Israel to find my roots, my heart, and my purpose on a 10-week solo trip. And in 1975, I was involved in a group meditation in San Francisco, and the love was so powerful in that space of 12 that I immediately felt this downpour of incredible spiritual light energy into my head like a beacon. And immediately an image came to me that I then sketched out on a napkin. It felt like this was a sacred geometry in a crystal form that was in response to a call that I'd had a couple weeks earlier, asking me if I would design a spiritual retreat center for them in Mount Shasta. I figured this is the one. And so I recorded that, captured it, and the drawing got me going in that direction. And it became known as Morning Star. And it took center stage in my life for a couple of years. And in 1977, I took the Morning Star design and my kids to the New Age Findhorn community in northern Scotland, and met a new metaphysical partner, Sylvia, whom I later married, and was married for 23 years. But the next year, I sponsored a friend I had met. His name was Ben Peach, to travel with Sylvia and me to research, to explore the Great Pyramid on site for the first time in his 25 years of research on that subject. So on October 12th, 1978, exactly to the day, I would like to share with what transpired a couple of years after the initial conception. And then when we discussed this design, Ben and I saw direct correlation of this design to that of the Great Pyramid and that of Stonehenge. And so I took this design with me in 77 to Findhorn to show people there. And then in October the following year, I went to the Great Pyramid. And when I saw the pyramid from a distance, I was just compelled to climb to the very top in very nominal street shoes, as you can see, and had a literally peak experience, which later entered as an advance in my design for the Morning Star project.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Okay. So more advanced designs of Morning Star were inspired by my Great Pyramid experience. And I moved to Bend in 1999 and focused on sustainable architecture and reached the status of lead accredited architect in 2006. And 10 years later, several colleagues in Bend showed great interest to build Morning Star in the Bend area. And in 2019, its context, the LightPath Educational Center was created as an Oregon nonprofit with 501c3 tax exempt status. I had a little time in between that to get to writing a book that you have provided some invaluable guidance on that. And just a very brief account of that. It's about going to a realm that knows no death, and it connects with the consciousness and continuity of all life through dolphin and whale consciousness. And it's a very compelling story, and I'm really looking forward to us working in collaboration on that.
That's why I do have to move to Bend, because we need more time to work on this book.
Right, that's wonderful.
What motivated you to organize a trip to Egypt, Lawrence?
Well, 40 years after that profound experience in Egypt, I felt it was time for a new insight. The history of this region links to the awakening of human consciousness among the most advanced spiritual cultures and civilizations of the ancient world. And by good fortune, I soon met Sarah Jane Sesse, who had been in Egypt over 20 times in her long career as a travel agent. And we co-created a private journey that 18 months later, 14 friends came together for 3 weeks along the Nile. The theme of the journey evolved to awaken the realization of who we are and why we're here. It was called Sacred Sites of Ancient Egypt. And our journey was comprised of 4 parts. The first part was the Old Kingdom, the pyramids, which is shown on a Facebook post on LightPath Center as of June 15th this year. The second part was to do with the New Kingdom and its temples and tombs. That too will be on the Facebook book as of today, the 27th of July. And the next chapter, chapter 3, was Afloat on the Nile. And it was 6 days of absolute bliss. And that's going to be posted on Facebook in September. And the fourth and final part had to do with Aswan and Nubia, with a final day in Alexandria, which is absolutely a stunning thing. And that will be posted in November.
Why would going into the past reveal one's future and purpose, Lawrence?
Well, as our world is in the midst of systemic changes, we really need to know the true roots of our humanity and the missing links in our coevolution. You know, we're told so many things about the past that were recorded by the emperors who had won wars, or those who had invented something, or great things that were done in their favor, and they shaped the way it was recorded, but that was not necessarily what was really happening. And we've adopted so many of these so-called facts as though they were truth. And we need a true perspective of our diverse makeup. And we may at last be transformed within this shifting paradigm individually and as a species. Since the beginning of civilization, our wisest ancestors were seeking greater meaning and happiness and control in their lives. And an enlightened tradition known as the Hermetic laws inspired the Italian Renaissance of the 15th century and the American Revolution of the 18th century. Its principles are timeless, as are the wisdoms and self-mastery. An example of the timeless wisdoms would be the first principle, that of universal intelligence. And therein, it states that the universe itself is mental. All phenomena of life, matter, and energy are thoughts of the infinite and universal living mind of the all. It's the infinite field and intelligence, the nature of consciousness itself. We experience the mental plane of thought, insight, intuition, and reason, whereas wisdom of this plane lies within the unseen causal planes.
So how might we relate to universal intelligence? The way I understand it is that studying with UNVEIL or Melchizedek for a while, who did a lot of work with Egypt, is that if we are developed into a universal mind and we meditate daily within the tetrahedron, that we can take over 100,000 people with us when that transition comes. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yes, right. That would be a wonderful conversation, perhaps, for another interview. And I'm going to need to do my homework on that, because I totally have a piece of that one, I'm sure. But how we might relate to the universal intelligence is the next point that I'd like to just address at this point. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so today millions are drawn each year to Egypt, most with a focus on the Great Pyramid and the Giza Plateau. Pyramid was said to be the tomb of a little-known pharaoh. Really, a structure of this size and perfection built by ancient beings whose knowledge and power vastly exceed our skill and technology? Perhaps now we're looking at a prime example of universal intelligence expressed by the Great Pyramid itself, which could teach us about ourselves and the universe. Obviously, we're being prompted to question beliefs that have veiled the truth of who we are becoming and why we're here.
Beautiful, beautiful. What's so amazing about the Great Pyramid compared to all the other pyramids?
Well, it's the largest stone building in the world. That's the first thing. It's over 45 stories high, about exactly 206 courses of stone. It's comprised of over two and a quarter to 2.5 million limestone blocks in the core structure at 2.5 tons each on the average, with granite stones in other areas up to 80 tons each. We don't have any equipment that can lift that. A technology and architectural marvel. And we have no credible knowledge of how the structure was built. Aside from its remarkable size and engineering, are its archaeological and astronomical features. So we're going to go to, okay. So I'd like to just share that Peter Tompkins, author of the classic Secrets of the Great Pyramid in 1971, a good 50 years ago, stated in his introduction, the astronomical, mathematical, and geodetic sciences of ancient inhabitants of Egypt and their cosmology and theology are only beginning to be appreciated. That's still true to a large extent. Now that our figures for the dimensions of this planet have been refined by orbiting satellites, the results are that much closer to the figures mysteriously built into the so-called Pyramid of Cheops. Cheops was the Greek name for Khufu. Archaeological and geodetic surveys found precise dimensions related to global metrics, earth sciences, and planetary periodicities. A repository of weights and measures, a model for the most sensible system of linear and temporal measures on Earth are based on the polar axis of rotation.
How is the subject of the Giza Plateau and the Great Pyramid in particular presented to the public?
Let's look at a few examples. Its unique interior features include an intricate network of passages as seen here. Its extraordinary grand gallery is 150 feet long and 28 feet high. Its granite-faced King's Chamber, 206 inches by 412 inches, is actually 10 cubits by 20 cubits. And in the year 820 AD, the Caliph al-Mamun's expedition forced an entry in search of royal treasure in the so-called King's Tomb, as depicted here. No physical treasures were found. The real treasure was encoded within the architecture of the structure. The pyramid was abandoned for 1,000 years because he saw no value in it and nobody else did. This one act was crucial. It provided access to the interior of the pyramid and its priceless and timeless treasure. No physical treasures were needed. The hermetic geometry of this structure, like a giant solar dial, its four sides measure the distance between the equinoxes and the solstices at the rate of precisely 100 inches per day. And another of many extraordinary correspondences, its perimeter of 36,515 inches is the same as the squaring of this circle. The squaring of this circle, this inner circle, which is proportional to the 365,150 feet in each degree of arc on the Earth's equator. Its sacred geometry includes a multitude of proportions, including the golden section, phi, that Pythagoras made famous thousands of years after the ancients who knew the golden mean 0.618 was derived from the cosmic rotation of the solar system. Let me take that over. Its sacred geometry includes a multitude of proportions, including the golden mean section phi that Pythagoras made famous thousands of years after the ancients who knew the golden mean, 0.618, was derived by the cosmic rotation of Saturn, the perfect expression of the velocity of the solar system. The amazing thing is that no other structure on Earth has been found with these exceptional features. All attempts to replicate just the exterior of the structure alone, without the inner chambers and passages, have been totally unsuccessful using our most advanced current technology. Other reliable sources of knowledge about the Great Pyramid have held my interest over these years. My affiliation with Ben Peach stands out as a reliable, salient source of extraordinary knowledge. He's been my mentor on the subject for 40 years, and many of his calculations are reflected here. His ongoing research of the Great Pyramid continues well into his 90s, and in the 1970s, he suggested to world-famous Paul Horn how to record his flute music in harmonic resonance with the Great Pyramid. As a special treat, Paul's recording is inserted in the conclusion of this talk today.
How is the subject of the Giza Plateau and the Great Pyramid in particular presented to the public, Lawrence?
The immense architectural and technological marvel known as the Great Pyramid is identified as the royal tomb of a single pharaoh, Khufu, who reigned more than 4,500 years ago. Who was he? Apart from his name associated with this pyramid, very little is known about Khufu. His only surviving statue is, ironically, the smallest piece of Egyptian sculpture ever discovered. A 3-inch high ivory statue found hundreds of miles away. The absence of any commemorative remains indicates he was a very poor builder, in bold contrast with purported responsibility for the most exceptional ancient structure in the world. By contrast, regal statuary of his successors were well documented in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. His son Khafre, shown here, was shown as blessed by the falcon god Horus, and also by the goddess Isis, with his wife on the other side. Khafre's son, Menkura, was also shown blessed by the goddess Isis, with his wife on his other side. Khufu's identification in the Great Pyramid is a very important question. We might ask, what proof is there of Khufu's identification with the Great Pyramid? The official position rests on the so-called discovery of his cartouche, a hieroglyphic name printed on the vaulted ceiling of the uppermost department of the king's chamber. Media coverage of the so-called discovery made by Colonel Howard Weiss was made famous in 1837. However, the conclusive evidence later determined that the cartouche signatures were forgeries. Experts later determined the cartouche signatures were forgeries. Experts noted sharp contrast with the precision, delicacy, and perfect proportions of the cartouches and hieroglyphics in legitimate tombs. The controversy embarrassed Egyptologists, but the story remains unchanged. The pyramids of Giza are unique, with complete absence of decor or encryption within them. Unlike authentic tombs of their eras, their era. These structures were built for other reasons. So do we know who the architect and builder of the Great Pyramid was? Well, let's look at a few of the conventional options. Sneferu, the king's, let's start over. Let's look at a few of the conventional options. Sneferu, the first king of Egypt's fourth dynasty and predecessor of Khufu, has been credited by some as the builder of his father's pyramid. On our recent journey to Egypt, we visited several of Sneferu's pyramids at the nearby Deshur site. Our tour guide said that they were built before the Great Pyramid. One might presume Sneferu's intention was to perfect the construction of a true pyramid with smooth sides and optimum slope of 52 degrees. We entered the large red pyramid, which was built at a less steep slope. Sneferu continued to pursue the more desirable 52 degrees slope, but failed. He hurriedly reduced the size and steepness of another pyramid. The bent pyramid at Dashur had serious structural problems. Sneferu had a goal to replicate an ideal which was beyond his reach. None of these buildings could be considered viable precursors to the Great Pyramid. We shall see that they were, in fact, failed attempts to replicate the Great Pyramid several millennia thereafter. Sneferu was an initiate of the Hermetic Mystery School, as were several others, but none of them have credibility as the architect or builder of the Great Pyramid.
Is there another scenario that links Khufu to the Great Pyramid?
Yes, but not what most Egyptologists would have us. Egyptologists, let's take that over again. You want to ask the question again?
Yes. Is there another scenario that links Khufu to the Great Pyramid?
Yes, but not what most Egyptologists would have us believe. Zechariah Sitchin, internationally acclaimed author and researcher and scholar in his book, Stairway to Heaven, postulated that Khufu saw the crumbled pyramid of Saqqara, as well as the seriously comprised pyramid of his son, Sneferu. None were promising. Then he saw the three great perfect pyramids that had no known history, ownership, or apparent purpose. These three. So he had a small funerary temple built near the largest. By default, some 4,500 years later, a bogus claim was adopted by Egyptologists without any viable proof that Khufu built the Great Pyramid. There's growing evidence that indicates that a more coherent scenario, one substantial relic, sheds light on the question of Khufu's standing. A limestone stela discovered on site A limestone stela discovered on site in the 1850s confirmed that the Great Pyramid was already standing when Khufu arrived on the scene. The Sphinx, too, was recorded as present, as was its causeway that led to the second pyramid, and the smallest pyramid was also present at that time. Khufu's successors probably adopted the other two pyramids at Giza as had Khufu, but later pharaohs were forced to build them, but they too were inferior to those at Giza. Let's stop for a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
You ready for me?
Okay, no, not yet. We'll start over. Khufu's successors probably adopted the other two pyramids at Giza. This one and this, and were forced to build them. Let's start over again. Khufu's successors probably adopted the other two pyramids at Giza, and later pharaohs were forced to build their own, but they too were inferior to those at Giza. Need I state the obvious? The age of pyramid builders of the 27th century BCE was made famous primarily by the three pyramids of Giza that existed long before the age of the pharaohs. My perception while on the plateau with Ben in 1978 included the vast, let's try that over again. My perceptions while on the plateau with Ben in 78, I perceived a vast, ancient, and advanced array of pyramids of enormous scale and mysterious purpose. My main question then, why were we able to build these pyramids so long ago and we cannot do so today? Most likely, the Great Pyramid is the most researched and rigorously surveyed building in the world. And its construction has challenged some of the world's greatest master builders, engineers, and surveyors. Countless research projects on the subject continue to astound and disturb us. Its construction and original purpose remain a mystery. It's been an area of study for me as an architect for these many years, with pragmatic concern for the down-to-earth issues of design and construction. Yet its most disturbing element is its unearthly sophistication and precision, wrapped in what some of us call sacred geometry. My pyramid mentor, Ben, has challenged me to wrap my mind around astronomical and astrological correlations discovered in his ongoing research of the Great Pyramid. He's a true poet, scholar, and savant. But while on the plateau in 2019, 41 years since our first visit, my own experience opened perception of a sacred ground of a very advanced ancient culture that implanted a timeless treasure on this site. Its exceptional structures and sophisticated site planning reflect a unified field of intelligence. With subsequent research, I'm now convinced that the three pyramids of Giza and Sphinx were essential concurrent components of an enormous plan that was focused on the future, not the past. All things considered, I'm now convinced that we mortals did not build this site. We never lost the ability to build that way because we never could build those unearthly standards in the first place. Its superhuman beginning had an enormous influence on the science, technology, and cosmology of the Middle East and Egyptian cultures that followed. I believe we have access to the mentality that created this site at Giza. It's not an alien consciousness, but an aspect of universal intelligence and divine wisdom that has served the development of life from the beginning of time. It's not foreign to us. Indeed, it's the inspiration that our ancestors lived by. And we today are drawn to renew that correspondence for our well-being and the renewed vitality of our world.
So, how might we understand the interface between the gods and their human counterparts?
The ancient Egyptian religion and cosmology provides a substantial historic interaction of humans with their gods. Some were considered netters as principles of nature and guardians. Others were gods of heaven who in times immemorial arrived on earth from our interactive universe. At first, only gods reigned in Egypt for a total of about 12,000 years. They were followed by a divine dynasty and demigods for an additional 5,000 years before the pharaonic dynasties began around 3100 BCE. After discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799, its hieroglyphic Egyptian and demonic, let's start over again. After discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799, its hieroglyphic, Egyptian demonic, and Greek scripts provided a means to decode the hieroglyphic language that brought the Egyptian culture back to life after its slumber since the beginning of the Christian era. Studies of Egyptian hieroglyphic records and cuneiform mathematical tablets of the Babylonians and Sumerians established an advanced science flourished in the Middle East at least 3100 BCE. That science didn't magically appear intact. It most likely was brought there along with a full array of scientific knowledge, measuring systems, literacy, and governance that planted civilization energies into the culture of an ancient Sumerian ancestry. With a fully developed written language and calendar, the saying, history began in Sumer, makes sense. Their complex calendar began in ancient Nippur in 3760 BCE, which corresponds exactly with the Hebrew calendar that states this year as 5778. Zechariah Sitchin was able to read the Sumerian cuneiform tablets as well as the Hebrew Bible. In his remarkable book, Stairway to Heaven, he indicated that the pyramids were built to provide large markers within a landing corridor that served the post-diluvial spaceport in the Sinai to guide the landing of spacecraft from a distant planet. The Great Planet also served as a pulsating beacon linked to an Earth Sciences data bank that could be protected in perpetuity. Its mission, to mine gold on this planet, including delivery of highly advanced technologies and scientific knowledge to civilize and revitalize the region. The Old Testament clearly refers to an ancient race of beings referred to as Elohim, the lofty ones, also known as Anunnaki in Sumer. They were also known as master space travelers in possession of astronomical knowledge and power and embodied universal intelligence. Within the continuum of conscious evolution, the space age quickly flourished in modern times with the inception of flight. From 1903, with the first flight in Kitty Hawk by the Wright brothers, just 66 brief years to the Apollo 11 launch at Cape Canaveral that delivered Commander Neil Armstrong to be the first to step onto the surface of the moon. Accelerated exploration of outer space led to solar system exploration in a history-making triumph of engineering and scientific discovery, including the first orbit of Saturn and the first to sample an extraterrestrial ocean. NASA's Cassini spacecraft in 1997 to 2017 revealed the process that likely shaped the development of our solar system. Discovered in 2010, one of 4 planets in the outer orbit of a red star only 20 light years from Earth and there are 4 planets, 1, 2, 3, 4, has astronomers considering life extremely likely to be supported on this planet. They're saying it's at 100% likely. Where did we get the idea to explore outer space in the first place? Really, that subject has been captivating human inquiry since ancient times. The Giza Plateau may offer answers to many questions we have avoided far too long. Who are we, if not part of the continuum of life itself? So we might ask, who really built the Great Pyramid, why and when? I mentioned pyramid builders who were known to be initiates of the Hermetic mysteries. One is not. Hermes Trismegistus. One is not. Hermes Trismegistus was the author of the tradition known as Hermeticism. One of his earlier incarnations was that of Thoth, shown in this famous papyrus, weighing the heart of the deceased pharaoh. He was the most brilliant and most major god of ancient Egypt, considered the design, measure, and scribe, god of mathematics, numbers, inventor of the calendar, and secret knowledge. He was also known as the divine architect, a descendant of Ptah, who was considered the creator god of craftsmen and architects. Thoth's presence blessed virtually every temple and tomb of the new age of kingdom. He holds the Ankh and the scepter in his hands, ancient symbols of a god and of immortality and the symbol of authority. His presence during the reconstruction project following the end of the Ice Age and related floods and climate changes would conceivably synchronize his impeccable timing and creative prowess, instrumental in the planning and manifestation of a new spaceport, a line over Jerusalem toward Mount Ararat. Significant ancillary structures at the Giza Plateau would have played an enormous part in this time frame of 10,000 to 12,000 BCE, which seems to correspond exactly at a time when Thoth reigned as the god of Egypt.
Fine. That was good.
Okay.
What can we now say about the enigmatic Sphinx, Lawrence?
We're seeking the clues of the remaining mystery. It has the body of a crouching lion and head of a man wearing a royal headdress. Its colossal size, 240 feet long, and 65 feet high, was sculpted from a single enormous piece of natural rock. A photograph taken around 1860 shows the view of a village of pyramid sheiks looking west along from the Nile to Giza. Although many others have done research on the Sphinx, the most extensive research has been done under the guidance of Max Leonard, sponsored from a grant from the American Research Center, ARCE, in Egypt between 1979 and 1983. Over 5,000 unique photographs and documents were compiled in this comprehensive project. Previously, no scale drawings of this unique monument and its 3 adjacent temples existed. All of these records were digitized, preserved, and made freely available to the public online through the website Open Context, released in 2017. After his research on the Sphinx, a survey map was devised by Leonard together with surveyor and civil engineer Richard Goodman. They founded the Giza Plateau Mapping Project in 1988 to answer questions about the origin and development of the ancient Egyptian site. At first, just the 2 of them trekked the vast site in an old Land Rover with brakes that kept giving out. In this next photograph, Goodman adjusts his surveying equipment standing on the highest elevation of the plateau, just west of the lost city site, where they found remains of a vast work party that purportedly built the second pyramid of Khafre and the 3rd pyramid of Menkaure. After 30 years of excavation and puzzle solving, one major Old Kingdom figure remains absent. Their official report remarks, in quotes, "We are still looking for the elephant on the plateau, Khufu, and the town that built the Great Pyramid." Isn't that interesting? Recent geological research on the Sphinx has concluded that the significant erosion pattern clearly indicates a natural process that spanned at least 10,000 years. That suggests a more likely context in which the Sphinx and the pyramids were developed. We now have pieces of a puzzle. Whoops, let's go off. Okay. We now have pieces of a puzzle that connect these wonders of the ancient world. They relate to dates scientifically verified for the end of the last ice stage in that region approximately 13,000 years ago. Biblical floods and enormous climate changes provided a viable context in which development of the Giza Plateau may have played an important part. Perhaps the Sphinx is indeed still leading those with an open mind from yesterday to tomorrow along the path of the hidden door.
So how might we move forward given the many challenges we now face in the world?
Good question. Our journey, by necessity, will help us renew the life force of our planet based on natural laws that provide continuity between our history and our future. The future of our species lies in the advancement of human consciousness. The turbulence of these times is a natural transition to realize timeless wisdom and fulfill our purpose. The combination of advanced science, guided by elevated human consciousness, will be the key to developing our scientific power in balance with the intelligence of nature. Believe it or not, the coronavirus scenario in the United States is a good example of good science, but misdirected and undermined by contrary objectives. However, its resolution is disturbing the status quo and opening a vast array of advances in science and technology. Elevated consciousness would help us avert other imbalances while moving forward with ways to reduce our negative impact on the planet and improve our diversified equilibrium. Access to information is essential to our equilibrium. Our future depends on it. Several advances over the past few generations have been key to connecting that intelligence across the globe. For instance, within the age of information, we've seen these first. 1981, the true mobile computer. In 83, the laptop. In 88, digital camera and transatlantic telephone. In 89, the World Wide Web. 91, webcam. 92, smartphone. 95, Internet Explorer. 97, Google. 2001, Wikipedia. Wow, it's dizzying, isn't it? The world has dramatically changed as information is made accessible as never before in human history. Named after the conquest of Alexander the Great, Hellenism catalyzed vibrant artistic expressions, expanded philosophical horizons, and a constant search for new knowledge. The Great Library, Alexandria, constructed after his untimely death in 323 BCE, best illustrated the spirit of Hellenism. It was once the last remaining 7 wonders of the ancient world, one of the most significant libraries and the capital of knowledge and learning. It was unfortunately destroyed over 2,000 years ago. This architectural model represents the design of an extraordinary modern library, cultural center, and international school of information built in 2002. Its ongoing digitization and preservation of regional and global heritage among the world's leading institutions are for the benefit of the international knowledge community. The Great Pyramid was the world's largest and most ancient library written in stone, perhaps as a timeless foundation for the embodiment and communication of knowledge and wisdom. A few words by the late great Schwaller de Lubitz in his Temple and Man are offered here to explain another form of communication discovered in his extensive research at the Temple of Luxor. He said, unlike religions of various ancient Eastern cultures that seek to transcend material existence, Egypt taught rather by human transformation. The ancient peoples did not use words as we did. They used symbols or sounds linked together. Words were of a musical nature. Speaking was a process of generating sonar fields, establishing an essential principle that underlies an object or form. That principle was and still is embodied in the Great Pyramid. A couple of years before we visited the Great Pyramid in 1978, Ben made a poignant suggestion to world-famous renowned flautist Paul Horn, who planned to record music in the Great Pyramid. Ben said that if he struck his palm against the coffer in the king's chamber, he would synchronize his flute to the harmonic resonance of the entire pyramid. He did that. His magnificent recording provides a direct link to the vibratory identity of that space. The transformative experience Ben and I shared the following year was later superimposed on Paul's recording. That was 41 years ago. I hope the music uplifts you as time stands still. The timeless journey continues, revealing who we are and why we're here.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, for this amazing interview. I learned so much about Egypt, and now I am excited to go with you. And hopefully the world will open up again to travel and we can fly freely around the world. And thank you for this extraordinary explanation about the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and the pharaohs. Thank you. Have a wonderful
Thank you,
day.
Petra.
Bye-bye.